Atari Jaguar. It was 1993, a time when the console wars were defined by innovation. Sega and Nintendo dominated, and Atari, the once legendary pioneer of video games, was desperate to reclaim its throne. Enter the Atari Jaguar, a machine that promised to be the world's first 64-bit console. In marketing, that sounded revolutionary. "Do the math!" the ad screamed, suggesting that 64-bit meant superior graphics, faster gameplay, and the dawn of a new gaming era. But what players actually got was a console that barely functioned as advertised. The Jaguar's architecture was a nightmare. 2 main chips, multiple processors, and a development system so convoluted that even experienced studios struggled to make basic games run properly. The result? Choppy frame rates, inconsistent visuals, and some of the worst 3D performance in console history. Virtual Boy. In 1995, Nintendo, the king of creative risk, made one of the boldest missteps in gaming history. The Virtual Boy was marketed as the future of immersive entertainment, a 3D console you could literally step into. On paper, it was visionary. In reality, it was a headache, literally. The Virtual Boy's display used a monochrome red and black color scheme projected through 2 small lenses. The result was an eerie, uncomfortable 3D effect that strained players' eyes within minutes. Most couldn't play longer than 15 minutes without dizziness or nausea. Nintendo wanted to innovate. They wanted to offer something unlike anything else on the market. But instead of creating immersion, they created isolation. You couldn't share the experience. You couldn't connect it to a TV. You had to hunch over an awkward stand and stare into a tunnel of red for hours. It wasn't portable. It wasn't fun. And it certainly wasn't the future. Sega Saturn. When you mention the Sega Saturn, most gamers don't think of nostalgia. They think of confusion. Released in 1994 in Japan and 1995 in North America, the Saturn was meant to continue Sega's winning streak after the Genesis. Instead, it became one of the most infamous failures in console history. The reason was simple. Sega didn't understand the battlefield it was walking into. The Saturn's architecture was a developer's nightmare. Dual CPUs, multiple video processors, and a lack of proper documentation made it incredibly difficult to develop for. Third-party studios struggled, and even Sega's own teams couldn't fully harness its potential. Then came the biggest blunder, its surprise US launch. Sega released the Saturn months earlier than planned, without warning most retailers or developers. Some stores didn't even have stock. Others, or notably Walmart, refused to carry it at all. Meanwhile, Sony was preparing to unleash the PlayStation. Their message was simple, clean, and deadly effective. $299. That was the price of the PS1, announced right after Sega revealed the Saturn's $399 tag. The crowd cheered. Sega never recovered. While the Saturn had incredible 2D capabilities and a few legendary titles like Nights into Dreams and Panzer Dragoon Saga, the damage was done. Developers abandoned it. Gamers ignored it. Nintendo Wii U. The Wii U wasn't the worst console ever made, but it may have been the most misunderstood. After the massive success of the original Wii, Nintendo tried to push innovation even further. In 2012, they released the Wii U, a console that introduced a tablet-like gamepad controller, promising new ways to play and interact. The problem was, no one knew what it was. Was it a new console? Was it just an accessory for the Wii? Even Nintendo's marketing struggled to explain it. The name Wii U confused casual consumers who thought it was a simple upgrade to their old system. Developers didn't know what to do with the gamepad either. While some used it creatively, like Zombie U or Nintendo Land, most ignored it altogether. And without clear third-party support, the Wii U's library quickly dried up. Even worse, the hardware was underpowered compared to the PS4 and Xbox One, both of which launched a year later. Sales were dismal. Only 13 million units sold worldwide. For a company that sold over 100 million Wiis, that was devastating. But perhaps the biggest reason gamers hated the Wii U was disappointment. It came after Nintendo's most universally loved console. It was supposed to innovate, but instead, it felt awkward, slow, and directionless. Ironically, the Wii U's ideas would later evolve into something extraordinary, the Nintendo Switch. But in its own time, the Wii U was the awkward middle child of gaming. Too strange to succeed, too flawed to be loved. PlayStation 3, launch era. When Sony announced the PlayStation 3 in 2005, the world expected another revolution. The PlayStation 2 had become a cultural phenomenon, selling over 150 million units, the most successful console in history. The next generation was supposed to be the moment Sony solidified its dominance. Instead, it almost destroyed their reputation. The PS3 was powerful. Frighteningly so, it boasted the Cell processor, an engineering marvel co-developed with IBM, capable of computations far beyond its rivals. But that same architecture made it one of the hardest platforms to develop for studios. Accustomed to straightforward PC-like design, suddenly faced an alien structure that demanded custom tools, coding practices, and immense resources. Then came the price when Sony finally revealed it in 2006. The audience gasped, $599. It was the punchline heard around the world. The now infamous quote, "Get a second job," from Sony's Ken Kutaragi, meant to justify the price, only made things worse. Gamers weren't laughing. The PS3 launched with a limited library, poor third-party ports, and a controller that lacked rumble because of a legal dispute. Even Sony's loyal fans began to drift toward Microsoft's Xbox 360, which was cheaper, easier to develop for, and had already built a thriving online community through Xbox. Live online play on PS3 felt primitive. Updates were slow, installs were endless, and the system UI felt clunky compared to its predecessor's simplicity. But what truly stung was arrogance. Sony had gone from humble innovators to untouchable giants, assuming their brand alone would guarantee success. It didn't. The backlash was loud, and for years the PS3 became a symbol of overreach, a reminder that no company, no matter how big, is immune to failure. Of course. History would later redeem the PS3 with a library of masterpieces like Uncharted 2, The Last of Us, and Metal Gear Solid 4. But those early years, the $599 era, remained burned into gaming memory. For a time, the PlayStation 3 was the console gamers loved to hate. Xbox One, 2013. If there's a single moment in gaming that redefined corporate failure, it might be Microsoft's Xbox One reveal. It was 2013. The Xbox 360 had been a massive success, adored for its accessibility and strong online ecosystem. Expectations for the next generation were sky high, but instead of focusing on games, Microsoft decided to sell a vision of the future, one that gamers wanted no part of. The Xbox One reveal was dominated by talk of TV integration, sports partnerships, and Kinect control. Xbox, watch TV, they said. Xbox, call your mom, they joked. But they never said what really mattered. Xbox, play games. Then came the bombshell, a mandatory internet connection. Players would need to connect online at least once every 24 hours just to verify their games. Physical discs wouldn't truly belong to you anymore. They'd be tied to digital licenses. In an industry that had always celebrated ownership and freedom, this felt like betrayal. Gamers were furious. Developers were confused. Sony saw an opening. And at E3 that year, they took the shot heard around the world. Their presentation was simple. A single slide appeared. How you share games on PS4. Two Sony executives smiled. One handed a disc to the other. That was it. The crowd erupted in laughter and applause. Microsoft had lost the generation in under 10 seconds. The Xbox One also shipped $100 more expensive than the PS4, bundled with a Kinect sensor most people didn't want. Its operating system was sluggish, its focus unclear, and its message tone-deaf. Gamers didn't just dislike it, they rejected it. To Microsoft's credit, years later they rebuilt the Xbox brand under Phil Spencer, focusing once again on players, Game Pass, and accessibility. But that initial failure scarred the company's reputation. For many, the Xbox One represents one of the greatest misfires in gaming history. Not because of bad hardware, but because of broken trust.